very small languages, in fact. There's even a discussion about adding more. Basque, maybe Letzeburgisch, maybe Retro-Romanian, yeah? It's an official language in Switzerland, so, well, it's not a member of the European Union, so we don't have to take that into account. But there's more of those smaller regional languages which are also part of that European Union. We already have 23 today. Those are the 23 active languages of the European Union. So actually also, in your European Works Council, you cannot expect that everybody will, certainly not everybody will speak Dutch, German, but even English. Although most people today do speak some English, you cannot expect that everybody will learn English and will have it easy in understanding and participating in discussions by speaking English. In industrial companies where you have people working on machines every day, come on, you cannot expect those people to be able to all learn English and perfectly speak English to be able to participate actively in the discussion. It's maybe a bit more possible in finance sector, where English is more or less a generally accepted standard language, but still there, you can't expect everybody to be perfect. But how far do you go with this? How far do you take it? If you have all those countries represented and everybody insists on having interpretation in his own language. I've done a training for the Faurecia group a couple of weeks ago, metal sector, French-based company. I had 18 participants, 9 languages. 18 interpreters, because you need 2 interpreters per booth. You're in a bit exceptional situation. You need 2 interpreters per booth. So I had 18 interpreters for 18 participants. And there was no other way, because there was no common language. We had people from Romania, from Poland, from Slovakia, and obviously from Germany, from France, from etc. How far do you take that? How do you deal with this? That's sort of a reality in all of the European Works Council. And it's not just the language we speak, it's also how we speak and the words we use. Even if we think we understand. I already gave you the example of trade union. We think we know what it is, a trade union, because we are trade unionists. We know what it is. Think again. If you meet people from other countries in your European Works Council, a trade union in their concept is by far not the trade union that you have in mind. Same for all those other words that we think, that we know so well, and we think we understand. A chairman or a secretary. I've heard many of you are chairman of your local, possibly also European Works Councils. But that was actually one of my first cultural conflicts with my own people in Belgium. When I was elected chairman of the European Works Council, and I went to my own trade union to talk about my experiences, and I introduced myself. Hello, I am the chairman of the European Works Council. Well, there were many of my own colleagues of my own trade union who said, what are you doing here? You're an employer, get out. Because the chairman in the Belgian system of works councils is the employer. Again, the example of Faurecia that I did a training for a couple of weeks ago. When they were thinking about establishing a European Works Council, the chairman of the German Betriebsrat wrote a letter to the chairman of the French Comité d'entreprise. He was very surprised that he didn't get an answer. Until he found out that the chairman of the Comité d'entreprise in France is actually the chief executive, the directeur général of the company. So obviously that person was not very inclined to answering the chairman workers representative of the German Works Council. Can be quite surprising. On the other hand, the secretary, for instance, in France, that is the central person. The secrétaire of the Comité d'entreprise has a very important central role. He is the main coordinator of the Works Council, or she. And on the other hand, if that secretary of the French Works Council were to contact the secretary of the Ondernemingsraad in the Netherlands, that person might be a bit surprised too, because the secretary of the Works Council in the Netherlands is not even an elected person. It's somebody who is employed, let's say, by the Works Council, who supports administratively the activities of the Works Council. So we all know what the secretary is, we all know what the chairman is. Not really. It can mean something completely different. So even if we understand the word, and we have perfect interpreters, it still can mean something completely different. And we can go through the whole list, and it's just a few examples. We know what negotiations are, we know what a collective bargaining agreement is, Tarifverträge. Again, it's all happening at different levels with different players in different countries. You have to know about this. Not assume that you understood. Think again, ask further. And as I said, it's not just, again, it's another, continuing on the debate on language and use of words, etc. It's not just a matter of different languages, it's not just a matter of different backgrounds, it's also the way we construct our phrases. How we talk. Again, even with perfect interpretation, sometimes you can get completely lost in your communication. Example is, say, the Nordic region, and probably includes Germanic region as well, of Europe. The way we construct our thinking, our expressions, is by first saying, well, you're in a discussion, you have to take a position, you say, I agree. Because 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're speaking to somebody who comes from a more Mediterranean Latin approach, you could be a bit surprised, because the way the thinking is constructed, the phrases are constructed there, is just the opposite way around. The French or an Italian, and certainly the Italians are a good example of that, in my experience. They will say, yes, but then thinking about that, and then picking up on what you said just a moment ago, and then maybe reflecting on something else. And maybe at the end, maybe, hopefully, they will come to some kind of a conclusion.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, a discussion between a Finnish representative and an Italian representative might be a bit complicated. The Finnish person will probably be blown away by his Italian colleague and be completely lost. Whereas the Italian will say, I haven't heard any arguments, and he wasn't listening in the beginning, and it was over before he even started listening, so it could be very complicated, even with perfect interpretation. The concept of time. I started my presentation a bit with that. Concept of time. If you say the meeting will start at 3 o'clock, who will be there at 3 o'clock? Well, the Dutch will be there at 2:45. I think that's the most punctual people I know. They really insist on punctuality. Germans, Belgians, most other people will more or less respect the timing and be there at 3 o'clock. Maybe a few minutes, you know. But then you also expect, of course, your Spanish and Greek and Italian colleagues to be there. Well, if you're lucky, they'll be there at 3:15. Time concept, and it's not because they are not punctual. That is the idea of punctuality for them. 3 is always 3-ish. Could be a quarter later, could be half an hour later. They're still on time in the meeting. And some people might get very nervous about that, because their concept of time is completely different. 3 o'clock is 3 o'clock, and you start at 3 o'clock. And when it's 5 o'clock is the end time, then you stop at 5 o'clock. When you have a coffee break at 4:30, you have a coffee break at 4:30, and not 4:35. I have had discussions like that. The concept of time is completely different. I've been to Spain last year for a videotaping, also in the frame of a European project they had with Comisiones Obreras. We started the video registration around 10:30 in the morning, continued until 3:30, and then the guy from Comisiones said, well, should we have some lunch now? I said, okay. But something light perhaps, we weren't finished. No, nothing light, we're going to have a full menu. Starters, main course, dessert, wine. 6:30, I thought, well, that's it for the day. We're going to continue tomorrow. No, we went back to the office. And we continued until 9:30 in the evening. We finished the registration. It's a different concept of how to use your day, of how to spend your time. Nordic people would have a huge problem with that, continuing after 6 o'clock until 9:30, and starting very late in the morning. it's just a completely different way of organizing your day. At the European Works Council level, you still have to find something that is acceptable to all of those different expectations. Continuing on what I've said about the time when we stopped, when will you have dinner? What's your normal time of dinner? 6? 8? Switzerland is more Latin. 6? 8? 6, 8?
7.
Well, we often do trainings with the Institute, we often do trainings in the Yellowstone in Sweden, in Runa. Dinner there is at 5:30. 5:30, and that is the normal time for dinner for them. We always have to negotiate, if we have an international group, to please be able to have dinner at 6:30 instead of 5:30, but they're not so happy about that usually. In our Belgium as well, Germany, I hear most people say somewhere between, let's say, 7:30. If you go to a restaurant, an acceptable time to go to a restaurant would be 7:30. Spain, you don't go to a restaurant at 7:30. You'll be all alone. Most restaurants are even still closed, except for maybe some tourists. Spanish don't go for dinner before 9 o'clock. Certainly 9:30, 10 o'clock. Yes, that's the time for dinner. Which is why we continue to work until 9:30. That was normal. They have a completely different concept of time, of how to use your day. So when organizing your European Works Councils, look at the composition that you have and try to avoid people being too frustrated about having to start too early, having to eat too late. Find some acceptable position in the middle. A number of elements which are not related at all, a few other examples, not related at all to the language, but to, well, again, things that typify each and every one of us. Some behavior we have and we think is normal and we don't even think about it all. But it can be shocking to other people. The way you use your hands sometimes. Some signs can be interpreted as positive or insulting by others. I already said the way you look at each other. Following somebody with the eyes in some Nordic cultures mainly is considered as that's showing attention, that's showing that you're interested in what is being said. Others might consider that an insult, that you're constantly looking at that one person. How do the Greeks say that they agree with you? How do they say yes? Well, you don't know that. And you, German, Austrian, are trying to explain something, trying to find a contact with a Greek colleague, and you're saying, look, this is, I think, how we should move ahead, and that's very important, and this is my idea about it. And that Greek colleague goes constantly, net. He will say, okay, forget about it. While this person was actually saying, yes, I agree. Just the way you shake your head, and on top of that, the Greek word for yes is ne. And ne in German and in Dutch, by the way, is no. Well, you can have a bit of a difficulty understanding each other. Well, you agree. I had the same experience, falling back on a language concept actually, that goes through my mind now. When I was secretary of and chairing meetings of the European Works Council of General Bank, I had to stop several times discussions that were happening between the Belgians and the Dutch representatives at that time. And those were trade unionists, so it was not about